Rain hammered against the hospital's windows, blurring the world outside into streaks of silver. Inside the small town the air felt tense, stretched thin by the sharp scent of disinfectant and the steady beeping of monitors. Nurse Elena Ruiz moved quickly but with practiced calm as paramedics rolled in 14-year-old Lily Carter. The girl's oversized hoodie clung to her, soaked through, and her eyes darted nervously around the room as though expecting someone to burst through the doorway at any moment. When Elena asked what happened, Lily murmured that she'd fallen, but her trembling voice and the fresh, finger-shaped bruises on her arms told a different story. Each time the curtain rustled, she flinched. Each time footsteps approached, her gaze snapped to the door. Out in the waiting area, Mark Carter sat hunched forward, elbows on his knees, tapping his foot with growing agitation. His glare followed every nurse who passed, a silent warning wrapped in impatience. The staff avoided meeting his eyes, but his presence clung to the ward like a storm cloud, dark, heavy, and ready to break. Elena could feel the weight of it, even from inside the exam room, and she instinctively stepped closer to Lily, sensing this was no ordinary patient and no ordinary night. Elena gently closed the exam room curtain, blocking out the waiting room's noise. She knelt beside Lily, speaking softly, giving the girl space to breathe. At first, Lily said nothing, just stared at her hands, fingers twisting the end of her sleeve. But when Elena asked if she felt safe going home, something inside Lily seemed to crack. Tears welled, and in a shaky whisper she admitted the truth. Her stepfather had hurt her, and this wasn't the first time. He'd warned her not to speak, warned her what would happen if she did. Elena's stomach tightened. She immediately stepped out to notify security and call law enforcement, but the response she got made her heart sink. The officers were delayed, tied up at another emergency. They couldn't guarantee immediate arrival. They advised the hospital to keep the situation calm until they could send someone. But calm wasn't an option, not now. From down the hall, Mark's voice rose sharply. He'd noticed the hushed conversations, the sudden change in staff behavior. His irritation had turned to anger. He stood, pacing, demanding answers, demanding to see Lily. The receptionist tried to stall him, but he shoved past her, heading straight for the E corridor with heavy, determined steps. Elena rushed back into Lily's room, locking eyes with the terrified girl. The footsteps grew louder, faster. Security was nowhere in sight. The curtain's thin fabric did little to block the shadow closing in. Someone needed to protect Lily right now, or everything she'd just dared to admit would be for nothing. Elena stepped into a supply alcove, her hands shaking as she shut the door behind her. She didn't have time to wait for backup that might never arrive. She needed someone who would act now, someone she trusted. With a deep breath, she pulled out her phone and dialed her brother. Sparrow, I need you. It's Lily. Her stepfather's coming for her. There was no hesitation on the other end. Sparrow's voice hardened instantly. I'm calling Bear. Within seconds, Sparrow relayed the situation to the Iron Shield MC president. Bear listened in heavy silence, his jaw clenched tight. He had been that scared child once cornered, helpless, unheard. Not tonight, not on his watch. Full shield call, Bear growled, the words carrying the weight of command. The message spread like wildfire. Phones buzzed across the county. Garage doors slammed open. Engines roared to life. Members abandoned dinners, pool games, and late shifts. The biker code protect the innocent activated every man and woman in the Brotherhood. One by one, headlights pierced the night until the streets trembled under the thunder of nearly 100 motorcycles. Allies joined in two clubs that didn't need details, only the call for help. 97 riders formed a single unstoppable wave, throttling toward the hospital with a mission carved into their chests. Inside the AAA, Elena pocketed her phone just as Mark's voice boomed down the hall. She glanced toward the entrance sphere, gripping her, but then, faintly at first, she heard it. The rumble, low, growing, getting closer. Help was coming faster than any siren. The automatic doors slid open with a gasp, and the quiet lobby erupted into chaos as nearly a dozen heavy boots struck the tile at once. Patients looked up, stunned, as a wave of leather vests and patch-covered jackets filled the entrance. More bikers poured in behind them, their presence swallowing the space with sheer force. The hum of conversation died instantly. At the front of the pack stood Sparrow and Bear, one sharp-eyed and quick, the other towering and unshakable. They moved through the corridor with purpose, every step echoing like a warning. Nurses straightened with relief as the pair approached the A wing, their protective presence cutting through the fear that had been suffocating the staff all night. Mark rounded the corner at the same moment, fury carved into his face. He marched forward, ready to shove past anyone in his way until he collided with two men who didn't take a single step back. Bear's stare locked onto him, cold and steady. Sparrow folded his arms, blocking the path beside him. "You're not going any farther," Bear said, his voice low, calm, final. Mark sputtered with outrage. He tried to shoulder past them, but both men held their ground. Behind him, more bikers quietly lined the hall, turning it into a narrow passage that led nowhere. Their silence was louder than any threat and unspoken promise that the girl behind that curtain would not be touched. Outside, the rest of the 97 riders spread across the parking lot, forming a tight perimeter around the hospital doors. Engines idled like growling guard dogs. To any outsider, the place looked less like a medical center and more like a fortress of steel and resolve. Mark screamed, cursed, threatened, his voice cracking under the weight of his own panic. But the bikers didn't flinch. They didn't argue. They didn't even raise their voices. They simply stood there, immovable and united, a human shield forged from loyalty and lived scars. And for the first time since Lily arrived, the hospital felt safe. Mark's rage finally boiled over. Red-faced and shaking, he lunged forward with a roar, swinging wildly at the nearest biker. Sparrow sidestepped, but Bear stepped in, absorbing the impact with the calm of a man who'd faced much worse. Mark tried again, fists flying, desperate to force his way toward Lily's room. Bear didn't strike back, not at first. He simply blocked every hit, his massive frame a wall Mark couldn't penetrate. The bikers lining the hall tightened their formation, closing ranks with quiet, intimidating precision. "Stand down," Bear warned, his voice deep enough to vibrate through the walls. But Mark wasn't listening. With one final, reckless burst, he pushed past Sparrow and lunged toward the hallway that led to Lily. For a split second, his outstretched hand pointed toward her door. Bear moved. It was swift and controlled more protection than violence. He grabbed Mark's arm, twisted it just enough to break his momentum, and forced him down to the tile floor. Mark's knees buckled with a thud that echoed through the corridor. Bear pinned him effortlessly, one hand between the man's shoulder blades, the other braced against the ground. "Your time hurting her is done," Bear growled, every word steady and ice-cold. Down the hall, the curtain to Lily's room shifted. She'd heard the commotion and peered out timidly. Her eyes widened at the sight. A sea of bikers standing guard, their vests proudly displayed, their stances unshakable. And in the center of it all, Bear keeping her stepfather pinned, not in anger, but in protection. For the first time in years, Lily didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel alone, she felt defended. The moment stretched, raw and powerful, until the distant wail of police sirens finally broke through the tension. The officers arrived to find Mark subdued and an entire biker army standing watch, unflinching. It was the moment everything changed. If you or someone you know is in a difficult situation, please remember that help is available. Resources like the National Domestic Violence Hotline and Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline are there to support you. You are not alone, and there are people who want to help. Have you ever judged someone based on how they look? We all do it, right? You see a group of bikers, leather jackets, loud engines, and maybe you cross the street. But what if those same people were the only ones who could save you? What if the most terrifying-looking people turned out to be your greatest heroes? Tonight, we're diving into a story that will challenge everything you think you know about heroes, villains, and the true meaning of community. It's a story about a little girl, a hospital in chaos, and 97 bikers who showed up to change a life forever. Let's set the scene. Imagine a quiet hospital emergency room late at night. The air is thick with tension. A little girl named Lily, no older than 7, is being treated for bruises she can't explain. Her father, Mark, is there, his voice loud and aggressive, his presence casting a dark shadow over the entire room. The nurses are trying their best to shield Lily, but the fear in her eyes is unmistakable. It's a fear that's been growing for a long, long time. The hospital staff followed protocol. They called the police. But Mark was getting more agitated, his anger escalating with every passing second. The situation was a powder keg, and everyone could feel it. The nurses were scared, Not just for Lily, but for themselves. They were trying to do their jobs, trying to protect a child, but they were outmatched. It felt like a losing battle. Just when the tension reached its breaking point, a sound started to build from outside. It began as a low rumble, a distant vibration that you feel in your chest before you even hear it. It grew louder and louder, a deep, throbbing growl that seemed to shake the very foundations of the hospital. It wasn't thunder. It was something else. One by one, headlights cut through the darkness, dozens of them, flooding the hospital parking lot with an intimidating glare. The sound was deafening now, the roar of nearly 100 motorcycles. The hospital staff and patients inside peered out the windows, their faces a mixture of confusion and alarm. Who were these people? What did they want? Through the glass doors they saw them. A sea of leather and denim. 97 bikers, members of the Iron Shield Motorcycle Club, dismounted in unison. They were big, burly men and women covered in tattoos and patches, their faces set with a grim determination. They didn't look like they were here to visit a sick relative. They looked like an army. They formed a silent, imposing wall around the entrance to the emergency room. They didn't shout. They didn't threaten. They just stood there, a silent, powerful presence that spoke volumes. Their message was clear. They were here for a reason, and they weren't leaving. Inside, the chaos with Mark was still unfolding. He was shouting, refusing to let anyone near his daughter. But the arrival of the bikers changed the atmosphere completely. The police had arrived, but even they seemed momentarily stunned by the scene outside. The bikers didn't interfere with the police. They just held their ground, their presence a silent form of support for the people inside trying to do the right thing. It was like they were a shield, protecting the hospital from the storm raging within its walls. The leader of the group, a man known only as Bear, stepped forward. He wasn't the biggest of the bunch, but he carried an authority that was undeniable. He caught the eye of the head nurse, a woman named Sarah, who had been on the phone with one of their members just an hour before. A single, almost imperceptible nod passed between them. It was a confirmation, a promise. The bikers weren't a threat. They were the cavalry. One of the bikers, a quiet man named Sparrow, had a niece who worked as a nurse at that very hospital. She had seen the fear in Lily's eyes, heard the venom in her father's voice, and she had made a desperate call. A call for help to the only family she knew would drop everything and come running. Her family, the Iron Shield. With the bikers standing guard outside, the police were able to de-escalate the situation with Mark more effectively. The sheer, silent pressure of 97 people watching your every move has a way of changing your perspective. Mark's bravado crumbled. His angry shouts faded into whimpers as the officers placed him in handcuffs. The immediate threat was over. As the police car pulled away, taking Mark into the night, a surreal calm settled over the emergency room. The adrenaline that had fueled the chaos began to recede, leaving behind a strange quiet. It was over. Lily was safe. The nurses immediately surrounded Lily, wrapping her in a warm blanket. She was still trembling, her eyes wide with the remnants of terror, but her breathing started to even out. The iron grip of fear that had held her captive for so long was finally starting to loosen. In its place, a fragile, new feeling began to bloom: safety. For the first time maybe ever, she felt like the world wasn't a terrifying place. Bear and Sparrow, the two bikers who had led the charge, were allowed inside. They walked past the hushed staff, their heavy boots quiet on the linoleum floor. They knelt beside the small chair where Lily sat, making themselves smaller, less intimidating. Bear reached into his leather vest and pulled out a small black and gold patch. It was the Iron Shield emblem, the same one sewn onto the backs of all 97 bikers outside. He held it out to Lily, his rough, calloused hand gentle. "This is for you," he said, his voice a low, soft rumble. "So you remember... There are people who'll fight for you. Always." Lily looked at the patch, then up at the two giant men kneeling before her. She hesitated for only a second before her small hand reached out and took it. She clutched it to her chest like a precious treasure. And then, for the first time that night, a small smile broke through her fear. It was a tiny, fragile thing, but it lit up her entire face. In that moment, she wasn't just being protected by strangers in uniforms. She was being protected by a family she never knew she had. Outside, the bikers started their engines. The sound wasn't angry or aggressive this time. It was a low, respectful rumble, a salute. It was their way of saying, "Our job here is done. We leave her in your capable hands. They mounted their bikes and rode off into the night, disappearing as quickly and as mysteriously as they had arrived. Passers-by and hospital staff who had gathered to watch the spectacle stood in disbelief. Some were snapping photos on their phones, trying to capture the incredible scene. Others just nodded in quiet awe, trying to process what they had just witnessed. They had seen something truly extraordinary. The story of the 97 bikers who stood guard for a frightened little girl spread like wildfire through the town. It was the talk of every coffee shop, every office, every dinner table for weeks. It became a local legend, a testament to courage, loyalty, and the power of a community showing up when it matters most. By the next morning, Lily was safely placed in protective care, on her way to a new, safer life. At the hospital, the staff looked back on the night with a mix of disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. The bikers had been the unlikeliest of allies, but their presence had been the turning point. They had left behind no mess, no trouble, only the memory of their incredible solidarity. This story is a powerful reminder that appearances can be incredibly deceiving. We're so quick to judge, to put people in boxes based on their clothes, their tattoos, or the sound of their motorcycle. We see a tough exterior and we assume the worst. But the Iron Shield bikers showed the world that night what true strength looks like. It's not about being the loudest or the toughest. True strength is shown through protection, through loyalty, and through selfless action. It's about standing up for the innocent, defending those who can't defend themselves. Those often feared and misunderstood can be the fiercest guardians of all. For Lily, that night changed everything. The world, which had always been a scary and unpredictable place, suddenly felt a little less frightening. She had a tangible reminder, a small black and gold patch, that proved she wasn't alone. It was a symbol of hope, a promise that even in the darkest, most terrifying moments, courage can arrive in the most unexpected forms. One act of bravery, one unified stand, transformed a little girl's fear into hope. It proved that no one is ever truly alone when there are good people in the world, willing to fight for what is right. It's a lesson for all of us. Look past the surface. Give people a chance. You never know where you might find a hero. Thanks for watching. If this story touched you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that good people are everywhere. Let us know in the comments what you thought about the Iron Shield's incredible act of solidarity. Until next time, stay safe and look out for one another.